Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for reconvening with the group. What I would like to do with the panel is if you each could please introduce yourself with your name, your title, and take 5 minutes to tell us what your connection is to G&E myopathy and role. That would be great. Ralph Loren, would you like to start?
Okay, I'll start. I'm Ralph Lauren. I'm a board member. I'm also the attorney for... Okay. I'm Ralph Lauren. I am a board member of NDF. I am also the attorney for MDF, dealing with contracts. I joined NDF first as the attorney, having worked with another rare disease foundation, and there was a question that they needed my help on, so that's how I became involved. I was asked to become a board member. I've been a board member for a year and a half or so now. My background is a lawyer, although I am also an entrepreneur at this stage of biotech companies, including a gene therapy company. My general work with biotech, I go back more years than I like to think about. I started developing immunoassays back in the 70s and became a patent attorney, and then worked in all sorts of litigation in the patent field, and then drafting patent applications at times. Then started doing licensing work, so I've done licensing work. I worked on the project with Nationwide Children's for NDF, and trying to get, the pre-IND work was done through that. Generally, my interest is in rare disease, as a whole, and G&E myopathy. I am helping right now with we got the agreement with PerkinElmer that Maderi is going to talk about for the whole genome sequencing, working with Munkel at Yale on on the work they're doing, including this work with the biopsies that are being taken today. And various contracts and benefits to doing that, trying to end up how to cure. We'd like to get to a transformative treatment. We want more than just to be able to treat someone and delay things. We're hoping to get something that actually can transform the body itself, whether it's done through classic gene therapy, whether it's done through CAR T, whether it's done through CRISPR or CRISPR-related or similar things like the Cas12 instead of the Cas9. All of these different things, we're trying to get the best way to do this. And part of the work with the whole genome sequencing and the additional work we're doing with RNA potentially is trying to find the way to get to understand the disease so well that we can actually get something that's going to work, and work hopefully permanently, and work in such a way as to get the best treatment for all of the patients, and trying to help the patients doing it. We don't want to do something precipitous where it actually could potentially harm someone. We're worried about that, or if they couldn't use it a second time, we had the wrong gene, not the wrong gene, but we need a modifier, something like that, and that's what we're trying to find out now. So that's how we're going ahead, and I don't even want to take more time. I'm going to, let's go down the line right now.
I'm Tessin Mozaffar. I'm a neurologist. I'm currently the chair of neurology at UC Irvine, which is not very far from here. And I'm originally from Pakistan, and my first cases of G&E myopathy I diagnosed in Pakistan, and there's a surprisingly high incidence of G&E myopathy in Pakistan. And I trained in neuromuscular diseases in St. Louis and got really interested in rare myopathies and muscular dystrophies, and also inflammatory muscle disease. So we run a very active clinic as well as a research program in inherited myopathies and rare myopathies. We've been the trial site for the Ultragenyx trial, phase 3, as well as the natural history study, where patients were getting flown in from all over to be evaluated on that. We've been part of all of the Pompe trials, which is another rare myopathy. And in that space, been working with some of the companies to develop gene therapy We also just got awarded the NeuroNext award, which is where the manic trial is going to happen, although I'm not sure that we're going to be a site for the manic study because they had already chosen their sites. But we hopefully will bring more phase 2 studies to Orange County and LA, greater LA region.
So I'm Wayne Grody. I'm a professor right here at UCLA School of Medicine. I've been on the faculty for about 30 years. I'm the founding director of our molecular diagnostic laboratories and more recently our clinical genomics center, where we do genome and exome sequencing in a CLIA lab. I'm also one of the founding board members of NDF, and I've always considered that a very valuable part of my mission here. I have some research experience with gene therapy of a rare recessive disease, namely arginase deficiency, which is in the urea cycle. It's a liver enzyme as opposed to muscle. But we're addressing some of the same issues about how do you deliver it and how does it be retained, and should it be gene replacement versus gene editing, CRISPR, as Ralph referred to. Another aspect of my work over the years has been in universal genetic screening for recessive diseases. So we were involved in getting, implementing and deciding how to do nationwide cystic fibrosis carrier screening, which is considered the most common lethal recessive disorder in North America. It's a much different disease than GNE, obviously, but I felt we could learn some of the lessons we learned about how you approach diverse populations could be relevant. And I'm very pleased today that there's been the blood draws for carrier screening. Those samples are important not just for exploring the disease itself, but it would be a way to identify couples at risk to either avoid a birth, or since it's a late onset disease, maybe be able to identify the patients earlier when some of these gene therapies might be more effective. And then lastly, since Ralph mentioned being a patent lawyer, I had a bit of experience in that world myself, even though I'm not a lawyer. But I was the expert witness for the myriad gene patent lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court that invalidated the BRCA1 and 2 gene patents for familial breast ovarian cancer, as well as all other gene patents. GNE, to my knowledge, has not been an object of anyone claiming patent rights, maybe because it's such a rare disease, but at least the outcome of that case will allow us to avoid such a thing in the future.
I'm Dr. Gidon Ackler. So until now, actually, you guys have been hearing about therapies that are coming out, basic science, and throughout the next couple of days, you'll continue hearing that until our previous speaker right now, though we haven't heard much about screening and prevention. So that's why I was called in today for the next couple of days to put on genetic screening for the community. And really, I think the leadership at NDF and some leaders in the community are realizing that the most cost-effective and effective way of eliminating GNE myopathy and other genetic diseases is through screening and prevention. So that's what this kit is here. This is actually a kit, a panel that I helped develop at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, and it's just a very simple saliva screening test. And it covers 281, now 283 genetic diseases. That's pan-ethnic. It covers all different populations throughout the world. And my focus especially was on the Jewish population of both the Ashkenazi and non-Ashkenazi communities. So until now, in the past, the focus was only on specific populations, like the Ashkenazi Jewish population, to screen for only limited number of diseases, and even only specific mutations, variants, that are disease-causing in the Ashkenazi population. But now with this research that's going to be published soon, and with the development of this panel, we realize that the borders are not black and gray anymore. Actually, we've even found that the diseases that were previously thought to be Ashkenazi diseases are found in non-Ashkenazi patients, and diseases that were considered non-Ashkenazi Jewish diseases are found in Ashkenazi patients as well. So it's really important to screen for all of these diseases. And whether you marry a Jew, a non-Jew, an Ashkenazi Jewish, non-Ashkenazi Jewish partner, it doesn't matter, because really there is risk still. You can share diseases in common and mutations in common. So this has been my effort for the past few years. I also started a non-for-profit organization called SHORE, Sephardic Health Organization for Referral and Education, and back in 2010 with other community leaders, one of which lost a grandchild to Wallman disease, another genetic disease that affects the Iranian Jewish population especially. So we realized that there isn't enough of an effort of education and awareness in the community, in the non-Ashkenazi population, the non-Ashkenazi Jewish population. So we started an effort to change that. But this applies to all populations throughout the world. It's very important to get screened for prevention, and we'll talk about some of the measures of the ways of preventing these diseases in our community as we open up the Q&A. But this is really my main effort. And also recently, I've started a company myself that I'm heading to screen for, in masses, very comprehensive screening through whole exome, whole genome sequencing, and not just focusing on carrier screening. There are many other diseases like cancer predisposition and other diseases that people can be predisposed to, but they can definitely take steps to prevent these diseases and ailments from happening in their life. They can get nutrition, fitness, and other interesting facts as well through this as well. The company is called Tovana Health, and hopefully we'll be able to reach many people and help introduce precision medicine into the community.
My name is Michele Onali. My background is cultural mediation and cross-cultural cooperation, but I'm here as a mediator between researchers and patients. I'm now based in Europe, and I recently attended the EuroDis Summer School, which in Europe stands for training for patients in order for them to learn how to engage and especially how to be part of the conversation. By the conversation, I mean literally be part of scientific advisory groups, because we strongly believe that patients should be part of the conversation. And this why? Because we would like research to be successful. We would like mistakes not to happen, and only patients can really guide the researchers towards the right primary, secondary endpoints, and to literally start a trial already understanding what needs we are looking for. So what do patients really need in their daily life? Before in presentations, the NIH talked about natural history studies, which are very, very important. So in patient advocacy, we also try to let patients understand that not only trials are important. We need to understand the disease first. And my role here is to mediate, which means to be a mediator and let patients understand exactly what's happening in research. And we get training, and regulators in Europe are giving training to patients in order for them to understand the language. If we are sitting at the same table, we need to understand exactly what researchers, what stakeholders are speaking about. So in order to collaborate, we need training, and that's why I'm here. I'm now based in Europe to pursue training and understand more how patients can be effectively positive in the discussion. So hopefully we will have more patient advocacy and more patients participating for Gina myopathy. My suggestion and my advice is always that to see that a failed trial should never be looked at as a negative trial, but always as a research that is going forward. So we need to work together, and this is why I'm here, because patients need to work at the same table with researchers and all stakeholders.
Well, thank you for the introductions. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Tricia Mullins. As Lally mentioned, I've worked in the biotech industry for 21 years now, as well as a Global Genes, an umbrella organization, nonprofit supporting the rare disorders. I've been privileged over my career to have 10 product launches, 5 of them in the orphan disease category, really advocating on behalf of patients, working with patient organizations, key opinion leaders, physicians, patient opinion leaders as well. And I myself was a patient and in the mid-90s diagnosed with a once rare disorder, multiple sclerosis. Obviously now has over 400,000 people in the US with MS. And I was someone who didn't have a clinical trial to go to. There were no drugs available when I got my diagnosis. So every time I meet a patient, it is personal. So as we get started with this discussion, it really is making it informative. And I think one thing that really hit home to me, Dr. Grody, was talking about just the potential of gene therapy and where that can be, and how does academics and industry partner best.
Yeah, and I think NDF has been a beautiful example of that, and we've seen it just this morning. Many of the basic research discoveries do come out of academia, funded by NIH as well as foundations, but we're usually not the ones equipped to take it to the next step. The clinical trials can be done at our hospital. For a rare disease, it has to be multi-center, as you've heard. But at least speaking for my own university, they don't want to be vendors of any product. So once the efficacy's been shown, they're more than willing to hand it off to biotech or big pharma, whatever is most appropriate. They have their strengths that we don't have, and vice versa. I think we really need a partnership. Unfortunately, the older people here may remember it, but when I started out in academic medicine, those two worlds were really considered enemies, and they wouldn't even talk to each other. If you were a professor, and it was considered beneath us to even approach a company. Of course, in recent years, with NIH funding being so tight, we've really depended on support and collaboration from industry and clinical trials, so it's been a wonderful collaboration.
Do we have any questions specifically for the panelists?
So I have a question from a patient who couldn't be here because this patient is afraid to be seen with this disease. As you know, in some circles, our disease is a stigma, and we have to hide it. And we have to say we had a car accident or something else. So he texted me and asked me if I will ask this question. He has been seeking solutions near and far. He went to Israel and to some other countries to find a solution for his disease. So his family and it's very emotional for me because I know this person really well. So bear with me. He said, is this a correct description of GNE myopathy? GNE gene produces the GNE enzyme, which has the job of cleansing the muscles. Our GNE gene is not producing the correct enzyme. Therefore, our muscles don't get emptied of debris and eventually lose its tone and strength. If we could do a bone marrow with corrected gene therapy, would that cure or improve our condition? Next, can bone marrow be shedded into the bloodstream and be collected from the blood? Thank you, Tara. Please call if there is any questions. Also, I need to know if the National Review Board approval is enough to perform gene therapy in the United States. Thank
wants to start? You want to start?
The first question, perhaps we can.
Yeah, if you can just repeat the first question, because I'm not sure I understood the bone marrow connection there.
Okay. He says, GNE gene produces the GNE enzyme, which has the job of cleansing up the muscles. Our GNE gene is not producing the correct enzyme, therefore our muscles don't get emptied of debris and eventually loses its tone and strength. If we could do a bone marrow with corrected gene therapy, would that cure or improve our condition?
Sure. So again, the problem is with the GNE is an enzyme, and it has to do with putting the right amount of silation or one of the chemical molecules on the muscle. And lack of silation, we believe, is what causes the muscle to be dysfunctional. To my knowledge, it's not necessarily a bone marrow disorder, and doing a bone marrow replacement like we do for some of the enzyme replacement diseases is probably not likely to work in this case. So gene therapy is probably the way to go, where you can actually correctly deliver the missing gene and fix the problem. Now, you can directly access the bone marrow if that's your second question. You don't have to wait for it to spill into the blood. You can actually put a needle directly into the bone and take the bone marrow out. But again, it's not relevant in this case, because you can take either a muscle biopsy or you can do a simple blood test, look for the GNE abnormality. The purpose of the MANAC trial and the purpose of the extended release sialic acid trial that Ultragenyx ran is to replace the sialic acid in the body, with the hope that that will correct the muscle defect and the muscles will get stronger and take care of the problem.
Let me speak to that a little bit too. Although he was talking about bone marrow, I think probably it's maybe a misnomer here, in that they're the idea behind the stem cell or somatic cells to be used in lieu of that, and potentially a gene therapy which actually was done in a cell that does reproduce in the body, like a stem cell or something along those lines. In theory, it might work, but it's so far away. I mean, that's not even a classic gene therapy. This is something that people are hoping could replace it in a cell that could then be used and grow in the body. The gene therapy per se is going to provide a copy of the enzyme. It's not going to be, it's going to be in the cells. It's not going to be in the genome itself of the cells. The way to get into the genome is a CRISPR or potentially, or actually like a somatic cell up the road, if we could do that. But that's a cell that's going to reproduce. The gene therapy will, provide effectively a good copy of the enzyme, of not just the enzyme, of the actual gene to be able to work, but it's not what's going to be in all the cells that reproduce that way. So there are a lot of questions he's asked there, but it's really the bone marrow aspect is, Dr. Mozaffar said, is that's easy to get bone marrow. You don't have to collect it from the blood. It's done all the time, but that's not going to do this. Bone marrow itself will not do this. Even putting a gene in bone marrow would not be a cure. It's a different type of cell you'd have to use potentially, and nobody knows whether that will really work at all.
I'd like to address the emotional social part you brought up, which intrigues me. We see this with many genetic diseases. I would encourage your friend to get involved with NDF, and NDF has done a great job of outreach to the GNE community. Some of you here know that I work also on another rare disease, familial Mediterranean fever, which is primarily seen in the Armenian population, but Jews get it as well as other ethnic groups, but anyone from the Mediterranean primarily. It's a much better disease than GNE because it's easily treatable with colchicine if you diagnose it. But I found, just as you mentioned, in those families, especially the Armenians I deal with, it's a taboo subject, and they don't even know what the disease is. It gets misdiagnosed as other things, never treated, and if it's not treated, then they will die, usually of kidney failure. I think in these ethnic groups in the Middle East, I'm not a historian, but I'm Ashkenazi myself, and I've seen Fiddler on the Roof. I think hundreds of years ago, when there were arranged marriages, I have a feeling that in these little towns, if word got around that your family had a genetic, well, they didn't know genetic, but some bad disease, you know, your daughters especially would not be so marriageable anymore. That may be one thing that has led to the taboo. I hope in 2018 we can put that behind us, and NDF is doing a lot on that angle.
Hello, panel. Thank you for your time today. I'm over here. Hi. My name's David Dronet. I'm a Gina patient from Houston, Texas, and I have 12-year-old twin daughters. And my question's about carrier screening. Are the results confidential? I'm concerned about genetic discrimination in the future, even if they have this or some other disease. Yeah, I guess my question would be, who will be able to see those results besides the patient? Or
Yeah, you're the screener, so sure.
Well, actually, that's a very good point. And actually, in 2008, there is a law that came out called the Gina, Genetic Insurance Non-Discriminatory Act. So it prevents health insurance companies from discriminating against people that are known to found to have a genetic disease or condition. And so they won't raise premiums in that sense, and they won't discriminate against you from having health insurance. It does not protect against life insurance and disability insurance. So maybe, hopefully, in the future, that will be the case. There will be other laws introduced. You know, especially if you do it as an out-of-pocket cost, which today, carrier screening is not so expensive. Even with the one that I'm doing today, it's only $350 out of pocket. So if you know, so in that case, the health insurance company won't even know that you did the screening, and it's completely confidential.
And keep in mind, as I mentioned before, every pregnant couple has to be offered cystic fibrosis carrier screening, regardless of ethnic group or family history, and insurance pays for that, and I'm not aware of anyone being discriminated against, and if they were, you could fall back on the Gina law and actually test it in court, which I don't know if that's ever been done. Since I've been on this board for so long, I know some of the history behind this. One of the other founding members of our board was David Remoyne, who was at Cedars-Sinai, and he's actually the father of medical genetics, my specialty. He was also very involved in getting Tay-Sachs screening going with Michael K. Back for Ashkenazi Jews, which, as you know, has been incredibly successful. It's essentially eliminated that disease in that ethnic group. He did have a pilot study some years ago offering screening for, I think, 4 diseases for the Persian Jewish community. This one, Wallman, and a couple of others. This was the main one. Yeah. I wasn't convinced the others were that important. But, it was a big success for the first 1,000 couples who came in because it was offered for free. As soon as the pilot study ended and there was some nominal cost, it evaporated. And I can kind of understand it. This is not a disease like Tay-Sachs, which is horrible tragedy in infants, and they die, you know, within a year or two. This one is adult onset. There could be a cure, you know, we hope long before that baby grows up. So I can see why couples may not be so interested in carrier screening with the object of terminating an affected pregnancy. But as I mentioned before, I think there's other benefits to carrier screening. Once the couple knows they're at risk, they know they're at a 1 in 4 chance of having an affected child, and it might lead to earlier diagnosis, which for some of these therapies, it's better if there's more remaining muscle that you can target. If you wait till everything's atrophic, it may be too late. We found that in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So I'm still a big proponent of carrier screening, as I know Dr. Ackler is, but I would caution you that at least in the Los Angeles Persian Jewish community, there hasn't been too much enthusiasm for it.
My question is the gentleman from UC Irvine. I want to know, as a patient who worries about the timing and the progression and the difficulty with coping with this setback, at what level are we at gene therapy? Has anything started? And my other question is, respectfully, if NIH is working on MANAC and products of this end result, trying to increase absorption of some acid, why are they not working on gene therapy, at what level they are, because throughout these years, I've found out that one of the biggest hopes is gene therapy, finding the source, maybe blocking the missense mutation, expression of it. I'm not a doctor, but at the genetic site, something like those people who discovered DNA, Watson and Crick, and understood at some site there is a problem. Could you send something to the site where it prevents it from expression, delays the expression, such as advancements in HIV and others, where us sitting here working against time and this progression is making our life very difficult. So basically the question is, at what level you are with gene therapy? Why not big organizations such as NIH does not work on gene therapy? And if this was a problem that affected hundreds of millions of people, would Pfizer be able, top doctors, sit on this and find a gene therapy and attack the problem?
So
my question may be a little bit too strong, too offensive at times, but I see no hope except gene therapy.
So let me try to answer your question. So the first question is, there are groups and companies that are interested in gene therapy. As Ralph can tell you, NDF as an organization has been pushing for it, and we had some initial contact with the Nationwide Children's Group, and Ralph can tell you probably more about it. In the meantime, we are also approaching other companies. There are a few other companies that we have been working with. Gene therapy has become really popular, especially since the Avexis trial showed that you can pretty much cure children with spinal muscular atrophy. The results of the dystrophin gene therapy trial has been quite dramatic so far. So I think there is a lot of companies are showing interest. I can tell you, just in the Pompe field, which is another rare myopathy, there are at least 3 different gene therapy companies that are trying to start a trial. So it's an issue of which disease to pick. When you talk about the big pharma wants to make profit, right? Their primary goal is to be true to their investors and their board of directors. So they're going to pick on a drug, on a disease that has a larger scope than GNE or Pompe.
Has gene therapy started for HIBM or GNE?
I said we are doing some of the preliminary work for that. So the answer is, in some ways, yes.
We had a doctor a year ago, Dr. Mendel, that spoke about hypothetically putting a gene into a virus, going at a third band sitting next to the DNA, remind the DNA the old days, or reverse the process, or somehow not integrate into the gene, but stand by the gene and remind the gene to behave like the old days and stop this progression.
Yeah, and that's what I mentioned about Nationwide, and I qualified that by saying that maybe Ralph can say more about it than I can, and maybe Lale would want to say.
I just want to say this, because if there's one thing you guys are going to leave here today with, I'm going to say this over and over and over and over. NDF is working on gene therapy. We haven't stopped. We started on December 4th of 2015 when we met with Dr. Mendel in Ohio. I'm going to let Ralph tell you the details of it, but gene therapy is a process. And in the first step, we had to do a pre-IND, which was, IND stands for an investigative new drug. And you have to show the FDA that it can be done safely and that you have a good proof of concept. We did that part, and that's happening. What we also realized is that no matter who we work with, we can only really get it with academia to phase 1. In order for this to be something that you can benefit from as a patient, this has to go all the way to phase 2, 3, and then to market. In order to make sure that happens, we've also tried to line up biotech companies that will actually be able to pick up the tab and do the work. So we're trying to organize and get our ducks in a row so that not only we're working with academics, but we're also making it possible for a biotech, a commercial entity, to be able to take this. And thanks to one of our donors, and VIP type people, friends of NDF. We have a connection now to a foundation that has given us the $2.5 million matching funds so that we can now actually afford it. So I know I announced that earlier. So to answer your question, yeah, we have started it.
How long this process can take or will take or might take?
This is an unpopular answer, but Ralph, I'm going to let you take it from here because it takes forever. Not fast enough for my liking, just to say.
It is a long process. I mean, basically, right now, the last number I saw, as there have been 1,100 INDs filed in the United States on gene therapy. Right now, in classic gene therapy, which is what we were talking about with Dr. Mendel, there has been one approved, which is the Sparks one, and that is a very specific, it is a retinal disorder, rare disease, and Amy could help me with this. If I screw up, please tell me. And it is an injection into the eye. It's a limited site, and so far none of the neuromuscular ones have reached approval stage. You get problems such as Sarepta, who is doing the Duchenne trial, just got stopped on the trial because they found there was actually some manufacturing problems with it before they even got into phase 2, between phase 1 and phase 2 trials. So they are actually on hold. They have actually bought a new AAV company in part to get away from, I think, they don't want to say it that way, but Nationwide Children's actually manufactured the material that they were stopped on with their new manufacturing facility. The work with Nationwide Children's we've done, we got to the pre-IND stage. Pursuant to that, they were supposed to give us a certain number of certain documents that went back and forth to the FDA. That was part of the contract. We were supposed to get them right away. That took 7 months to get those documents, and they're still not complete. From those documents, the FDA did not give a positive result to the pre-IND. It was actually fairly negative, a lot of questions asked. So that work, and some of those questions are things that may be answered with some of the other work we're doing right now. So we are going forward with it. You asked how long it takes. The average time for a drug to go from IND to approval in the United States is between 8 and 10 years. The original pre-IND with Nationwide Children's was talking about doing 6 patients, which is the same size as the Dysferlin disease that the Jane Foundation set up, which was 6 patients. They actually did 1 patient, wait 8 weeks, do another patient. So even the trial for the phase 1 took something like a year plus, year and a half. And that is a likely time frame to do it just to get a limited number of patients, just for safety's sake. That, although there's been some work done in that, the results show moderate at best effectiveness on it. And the muscular diseases ones have been very difficult. It's the problem with like an eye or such, or a limited location. If you're doing a systemic injection of this, it's going, who knows what muscle cells it's going to take. And that's the biggest problem with the muscular diseases. We're trying to find a way to make it better, and so that's where we're working on it now.
I would just add for the lay people and who are most of the audience, every gene is different, every disease is different. It's like different kinds of cancer. Some are readily curable, some are almost completely resistant. Of course, we're excited by Dr. Mendel's work. I missed the symposium last year, but I saw him speak at another conference I was at. I actually didn't even believe the videos he showed. I thought they had to be faked because I see SMA patients and they don't even lift their head up, and these kids are playing ball and everything. But that's a totally different disease. It's even at the DNA level. You mentioned Watson and Crick. That gene has a pseudogene very closely related to it, right next to it, that you can if you're clever, you can turn that one on, and it'll substitute for the mutated gene. We don't have anything like that in GNE. Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a separate case. It's 2 million base pairs long. It's so huge. So every disease and every gene has its unique challenges. Just because there's one successful gene therapy trial doesn't mean we've now got gene therapy for every disease.
I will add just one thing regarding gene therapy. Gene therapy being an innovative therapy brings excitement, but not much is known, and I suppose the positive examples that we have at the moment are mostly done on children. And a lot needs to be done. I understand how patients need something fast, but we also need to understand how the regulatory bodies work, what they need in order to approve a therapy. I believe MANAC needs to go on because it could bring some positive effect. Gene therapy, we're not there yet. And I suppose also as the NDF is working a lot on this because it's a proof that a patient organization can bring something forward. The NIH is already working on MANAC, and it would be very difficult for them to work on gene therapy at the same time. So we need also to be careful with innovative therapies. They bring excitement, a lot of excitement. And we need to be careful when there is so much excitement involved, we risk doing something and then fail again. So we need more knowledge.
I agree with Michaela's statement. Right now we are riding a wave with gene therapy. The trajectory is very positive, so across all therapeutic areas. So risk-benefit, and again, rare disorders, you don't want to lower the bar for what the studies are needed, but we want to do it at an accelerated pace. We do understand that. One last question.
I'm just curious, what has been done to inform and to educate clinicians across the world so that we have better and more timely diagnosis of the disease? It seems to me that it's a rare disease today, but it's not going to be as rare tomorrow, and definitely probably not a rare disease at all down the road should we not find some kind of a cure for the disease. So what's been done to help inform and educate clinicians so that we can more promptly and effectively diagnose the disease?
So I think generally when at the neuromuscular courses or neurology courses, there have been a lot of discussion about inherited muscle diseases, including GNE. GNE gene testing is part of pretty much all the gene diagnostic panels that commercial laboratories have. And Dr. Hegde can tell you that when the Combined Muscular Dystrophy Association and Jane Foundation free genetic testing was launched, a number of new cases of GNE were picked up as part of that genetic testing, even though their physicians had not suspected them to have GNE myopathy. Okay, so it is not, I mean, if you have a practice like mine, which is exclusively for neuromuscular diseases, it's not an uncommon disease. I would say that at least in the top 10, you will, in diseases that we see, okay? And because it's included in these gene panels, and these gene panels are still free to test, so the Muscular Dystrophy Association is still paying for it through the MDA clinics. Invitae, which is a commercial lab, can do it for free if the patient has no insurance. We will pick up more cases, okay? And I think the physicians are generally being aware. Having patient meetings like this where we can invite the community physicians, like NDF has done here, NDF has done this in Turkey. There are meetings in India, there are meetings in Pakistan that have happened. Especially areas where we think the incidence of disease is high. Like for instance, a number of new cases were picked up in Saudi Arabia. So I think the awareness is increasing, and we are picking up more and more cases.
I've had symptoms of my disease for 25 years now, and I have not yet met a clinician that was familiar with the disease that I didn't have to educate to some extent. And, you know, I look at it in my own family. My two parents, who were both, you know, carriers, have now produced at least a dozen carriers and 5 people who are, you know, inflicted with the disease. So I look at those numbers and I just think, yeah, this is rare today, but it's not going to continue to be rare. And my children all take on the thought that they don't want to be tested. They don't want to avoid or abort a pregnancy until they know if there's a treatment. They look at our lives, my life, and my siblings' lives, and they say, you guys manage your disease pretty well, and we don't, you know, we don't want to know about this unless there's something you can do about it. So I think it'll continue, and I just wish that we had more clinicians that could be of support
And I
to
think
patients.
that's a great point, you know, so thank you for sharing, but I do think that's something from NDF standpoint. They've done a lot in other countries, and here in the US, how do we get the message out to the physicians so the awareness, the education, the diagnosis is happening earlier, and to your point with the carrier screening. So what I really encourage everyone today is at lunchtime, because we are ending the panel, but you know, Ralph Loren regarding the G&E treatment time frame, Dr. Mozafar with the genetic testing, where are we from the time frame, what are other clinical trials, Dr. Grody as well, and Michaela. You know, Urardis is a great organization, ex-US, that, you know, what are you doing, you know, in your own country, and really learn about her experiences with the summer school, which I think is a great opportunity. So thank you to the panelists, and please inquire for questions further at lunch with the panelists. Thank you.